Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Getting to my favorite subject, that would be a college football playoff system. I invite you to jump on the live chat and let me know what you think of my system, and then also propose your system if you have one. If you don't, certainly listen, make your comments and suggestions. Always looking for content and guest suggestions from you. So let me know who you would like to see on the show, what you want us to talk about. As you can see from the previous videos that I've just posted here in the last week or two, we are looking forward to Rivalry Month here on Mark Rogers TV. That is June. There is no dead season for college football here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. June is Rivalry Month. We are going to be talking best rivalries. We're going to bring on, let's say, a Texas guy, an Oklahoma guy, and let them go at it. We're going to be doing all of that throughout the month of June as we continue to break down the top 5 at every position in every conference in the Power 5, the top 10 at every position in the nation, and position by position discussions for the top college football teams in the country. All right. I basically have 2 proposals for the college football playoff. Number 1 would be we include everyone, meaning the group of 5 will be considered. So what we have right now is a system in which the group of 5 has absolutely no chance of making the college football playoff. It will have to be proven to me that the college football playoff selection committee will select a group of 5 team. Because we had 2 lost teams considered this past season, we had a non-conference champ for the 2nd consecutive year selected, and we had a Central Florida team that was 13-0, then somewhat proved to be worthy after defeating Auburn in the Peach Bowl, snubbed. So this is just not democratic. I am not going to argue that the group of 5, even the best of the group of 5, is one of the top 4 teams in the country. I don't even believe after the Auburn win that Central Florida was one of the 4 best teams in the country. But as you've heard me state a number of times here, I'm not vying for a system in which we think we are God and going to determine who the 4 best teams are. We don't know who the 4 best teams are, and anybody who thinks that they do go off the data after the games are played to say, see ya, I told you so-and-so was the best team because they just won the playoff. No one knew when Ohio State was selected in 2014 that they were better than TCU or Baylor. They just happened to be selected based on the 59-0 rout of Wisconsin and better name brand value. And they won a Big Ten championship outright versus TCU and Baylor, and the College Football Playoff Committee chose the easy route in not selecting between the 2 co-Big 12 champions. And then Ohio State went out and proved to be the best team, defeating the 2 other best teams, Oregon and Alabama. The College Football Playoff Committee, if you have, for some people, so much trust in the College Football Playoff Committee, they have yet to select a number 1 seed that has won the College Football Playoff. So we've had 4 years of this. And if they understand these teams so well and they have rated them so accurately and watched the games and between the metrics and the resume and the record and the track record and the eyeball test, they have so well evaluated these teams and they are so on the money, then they would have at some point in 4 years selected a number 1 seed that would then go on to win the national championship. They have failed to do that. So their selections are not on par. And if I have another person who says so-and-so proved to be the best team because they won the playoff, obviously the teams that are excluded from the playoff, they have no opportunity to prove that they might be the best team. All right, so I've got the live chat up here, and I'm going to make 2 proposals, and I've got about 20 minutes to do so. So proposal number 1 is to include the group of 5. And the way we would do that is we have 130 FBS teams currently, and again, it bothers me beyond belief that we have major college football teams that have no chance of playing for a championship. We have roughly 60 teams in the group of 5 who have no chance of winning a national championship. I don't believe you can name me any competition above the high school level in America in which teams have no chance to win a national championship. You go to any other level of football, Division II, Division III, NAIA, and everybody's eligible to win the national championship. So these guys, many of them go on to play in the NFL a couple of years later, but they can't win a national championship in college. So either include them or exclude them. Don't make it vague. Don't give them false hope that they can compete for a national championship. That's all they have right now, false hope. So what you do here is you go 16 teams, and you've got 10 conferences. You've got the 5 Power Fives, and you've got 5 other conferences, the Group of 5, of course. And you include all the champions. And I am not pretending that these are the 10 best teams in the country. And then we have 6 wild cards that are selected based on metrics, based on the selection process, much like the College Football Playoff Selection Committee right now. And the reason that that selection doesn't bother me is that we've already represented all the conferences. So we don't have 5 conferences vying for 4 spots in which there is a selection to represent. The Big Ten's not going to get left out. The Pac-12, the Big 12, as has been the case the past 3 years, will not be left out. Nobody will be left out. The MAC won't be left out. You've got 10 conference champions playing and 6 wild cards for 16 teams. And for those people that say that it can't work based on the calendar, I've worked it out, have given teams 2 weeks off after the conference championship games, and still brought it all together by roughly the 10th of January, which is right now the conclusion of the college football season. So it can be done. It is done on other levels of football with 16 teams. So if we're concerned falsely about injuries or concerned about final exams, for some reason, football players, student athletes that are more focused on their academics at other levels that have no chance of playing in the NFL, they play playoffs, and it's only going to affect a couple teams in the country. All right, that's one model. Model number 2, if you don't believe in the Group of 5, don't believe that they should take part, then let's not give them false hope. Let's cut them off and say we are playing strictly a Power 5 national championship. Group of 5 is not eligible. Go do whatever you want to do, Group of 5. You can play your own national championship if you'd like. In the Power 5, we would then select 8 teams because someone involved in this selection process that devised this college football playoff didn't pass first grade math. 4 slots, 5 conferences. 4 slots, 5 conferences. That's almost like the NFL saying before each and every season, we've got 8 divisions. We're going to have a 6-team playoff. We're going to have a 6-team playoff. We've got 8 divisions. It's idiotic. And it would make even more sense in the NFL because they have a better cross-section of games to judge these teams on. They play each other more often to actually make that decision than in college football, when there are teams that barely touched playing any of the other 4 conferences. So take Oklahoma, for example, this past season. They beat Ohio State. That was great. That was to their credit. This is not the best example I could come up with, but off the top of my head, that was the only exposure that Oklahoma had to the rest of the nation. And that's similar to just about every other Power 5 team outside of a few teams here and there that open themselves up to 2 Power 5 games, like a USC who played Notre Dame and played Texas this past season. So my second version of a playoff would be 8 teams, automatic berths for the 5 conference champions. I'm sure you've heard this many times. It's simple. It makes sense. Then you've got the 3 other spots for wild cards for the best teams. And you can make that a metric. I would include some balance and some combination of a metric, and that would encourage better scheduling, and also a college football playoff selection committee to select the wild cards. They should not be selecting as they currently do. They have an impossible job. and one that I think they've done a reasonably good job at. They kind of screwed up the last 2 years, but that's fine because they continue to contradict themselves now, and that's understandable because each and every season is different. So they put these standards in place, like a 13th data point or a conference championship, and then they contradict themselves the next year or the next year. And that's, again, it's understandable because they can't foresee what's going to happen. We are going to have a logjam with 2 lost teams at some point. We're going to have all sorts of crazy scenarios come up that we have yet to anticipate. We're going to have 2 lost teams, then we're going to have group of 5s with no losses, and what do we do with them? All sorts of things like that are going to happen. Now, the key to all this, and you've heard this before, 16 teams, including the group of 5 and 10 conference champions, one in which I don't pretend to say that the Sun Belt Conference winner is one of the 16 best teams in the country. It's much like the NCAA tournament. Are those the 64 or 68 best basketball teams in America? No, probably about the top 40, 45. And then there's a drop off. There are teams from power conferences, from the ACC and the Big East and other conferences that are better than conference champions from these little conferences, but they didn't make it. But you still represent all the conferences. And in the NCAA tournament, of course, they represent them with 4, 5, 6, 8 teams. I just want one representative from any conference. Take 2011, Wisconsin. They lost 2 football games on the final play of the game. They won the Big Ten championship. No one outside of the Big Ten proved better than Wisconsin. Nobody beat Wisconsin outside of the Big Ten. They actually lost the 2 games on the last play of the game to Ohio State and I believe Michigan State that year on the last play of the game. So who's to say that Wisconsin should not be in a playoff? Nobody outside the Big Ten beat them. Okay. The key to especially the second version, and really the first version with all the wild cards in play, is scheduling. The conferences have to come together on scheduling, and I'll address the chat in just a second. The conferences have to get together on scheduling. There has to be uniform scheduling, both in terms of conference scheduling and non-conference scheduling. So proposal number 1, conference scheduling. As you have seen, if you've checked out the videos on my conference scheduling fixes for all the conferences, excluding the Big 12, because of course they have the perfect scheduling formula. Everybody plays everybody. It's balanced scheduling. It's fair. It's equitable. These conferences have to get to equitable scheduling. Number 1, go to a 9-game season. There's no reason to play 8 games and 4 out of conference and play 2 total cream puffs or sometimes 3, most of the time 3. There's no reason to do that. I know these teams can't beat themselves up over and over and over again. So play a group of 5, play an FCS, so forth. But within the conference, play 9 games. Everybody plays 9 games. Okay, you play the 3 non-conference games, and let's back up a step, within the 9-game conference season, you've got to have an equitable non-division schedule. Everybody's should be close to a 500 aggregate non-division schedule. You can't have Georgia playing Alabama and Auburn and have Tennessee playing Ole Miss and Arkansas. That's not representative of the league so that these teams can compete on an even playing field for a division championship. You have to equalize and balance the scheduling out of the division. Unless you want to go back to 10-team conferences like the Big 12 and the old Big 10 and the SEC, the old SEC way back before 1991, and everybody plays everyone. That's actually the best way to do it. And then you don't have to have arguments and a question, well, I wonder what would have happened if Wisconsin would have had to play Michigan or Michigan State like Iowa did. You have none of those questions. All the scheduling's the same. But we're in this world of mega expansion, and it's not going to go back to 1980. So we're in 2018, and we have 14 team conferences, maybe 16 here someday. So at least there has to be an effort to make the schedules balanced. Okay. Point number 2 is with the non-conference scheduling, that has to be balanced as well. Schools will no longer, under my system, have any agenda or any authority to go schedule their own games. Who schedules their own games? Is the NFL telling teams, go out and schedule your own games? And this team will end up playing the New England Patriots. They'll have to play them twice and play somebody else. They'll have to play the Philadelphia Eagles, and man, they got screwed. And over here, you get to play the Browns twice, and you play the Houston Texans, and people, teams running out, programs running out, scheduling their own games. No, you bring this under a committee that will schedule the non-conference games. So everybody's got 3 non-conference games. Schedule 1. Give each program the authority. You can go out and schedule one of your 3 non-conference games each and every season. So most likely you want to make that a group of 5 or an FCS. We're going to schedule the other 2. And what we're going to ensure is that we're going to take great regional rivalries into consideration. We're going to ensure that the rivalries that are already established will be played: USC, Notre Dame, South Carolina, Clemson, Florida, Florida State, Georgia, Georgia Tech, etc. And we're also going to ensure that the schedules for those 2 non-conference games are with teams that finished an aggregate 500 non-conference or conference schedule the season before. That creates equity. So Alabama's playing Louisville in week 1. Louisville went 4-4 in the ACC last year. Therefore, we go find, well, they would have a 9-game conference schedule in my system. So let's say Louisville went 5-4 in the ACC last year. We're going to go find a 4-5 team for Alabama to play to balance that non-conference schedule. Another example, let's say Ohio State, we want to match them up with Oklahoma, who went 7-2. They went 8-1 in the Big 12 last year. We're going to go find a 1-8 team for Ohio State to play, whoever that is. North Carolina, 1-7, would have been 1-8 in the ACC last year. So Ohio State's non-conference schedule this year is going to be Oklahoma and North Carolina. Believe me, it works. I've worked out all the metrics, worked at the teams, matched them up. It works. It's not difficult. And we can maintain all the regional rivalries. We can have great non-conference games. And we wouldn't need to be running around each and every season targeting teams and saying, why are they playing nobody? And why is USC playing Notre Dame and Texas? And now we've got to compare at the end of the season a team that played 2 really tough teams in the non-conference versus a team that played nobody. Alabama is playing Duke as their toughest game, as their one big-time non-conference game in 2019. All right, let's hit the chat. All right. Big Poppy JT, you're late. Yeah, sorry, I just, on a whim, just thought I'd strike it up. I wanted to be more prepared to explain my college football playoff system, but I just thought, hey, I just have to get it out there and get going here on this discussion. Coconut Cane. No Navy, no Florida school will want to play the current national champion, Central Florida. So this Wednesday night, 8:30 Eastern time, Daniel Alveri, she is with Bruins Online and also with Gojo Bruin. We're going to talk UCLA football, but we're also going to talk about Central Florida's claim of a national championship. I believe we have differing opinions, and it should be a great discussion and debate with Danielle this Wednesday night at 8:30 Eastern time. So join us there. I will release the schedule. We've got 3 big segments coming up on Tuesday night featuring Mike Laval and others. We've got 3 or 4 on Wednesday night, 3 or 4 on Thursday night. Okay. I like the college football playoffs, how it is the best teams get in. How do you know, Big Poppy JT, who the best teams are? How do you know? How do we know? Of course we want the best teams in, but who? I don't see any deity around who's omniscient, who knows who the 4 best teams are. Of course, it would be great to know, oh, they're the 4 best teams. We'll put them in. In the one scheduled game, don't schedule Memphis coming from a Bruin fan. Yeah, that's a risky game for UCLA to play. They're supposed to beat Memphis, but they weren't better than Memphis, and they had to go to Memphis, and they lost. I don't know what that really does for them, but it was a fun game to watch with Josh Rosen going against Memphis. I didn't have a problem with the BCS. Okay, Coconut Kane. You had no problem with the BCS. You had no problem with the BCS. You had no problem in 2004 when Oklahoma and USC were preseason 1 and 2, and Auburn was preseason 19. And Auburn played in what I believe most people would consider at the time the best conference in college football and finished undefeated. But you know what happened to them? They went up and up and up and up in the polls, and then they hit a ceiling because Oklahoma and USC did not lose, and Auburn finished at number 3, and they couldn't play for a national championship. That's the BCS system. The BCS system also gave us a situation in 2007 in which you tell me who should have played in the national championship game. Ohio State was selected. LSU was selected, but did they have any better claim than a number of other teams across the country? The Big 12 champion was 11-1. West Virginia was 11-1 just because they lost at the wrong time. I could go through every year of the BCS and tell you what went wrong. 2011 is the classic case, Alabama LSU. No other conference gets a chance to play. That's what happened. No other conference got a chance to play in the BCS championship game. We're playing two teams, and I'm not saying LSU and Alabama weren't the two best teams. You need to understand. Somebody asked me when the BCS game was selected in 2011, who are the best two teams in the country? Do you agree with the selection? And I said, no. Then they said, who do you think are the two best teams in the country? And I said, LSU and Alabama. I said, but they already played, and one of them didn't win a division championship. We have another team with one loss. We could go through every season, and it's easy to tear the BCS apart, which ran from 1998 through 2013, of course. Look at the very first year, 1998. Tennessee goes undefeated. Fine. 6 teams had one loss. You tell me who should have played Tennessee in the national championship. Florida State, 1 loss. Ohio State, 1 loss. Wisconsin, 1 loss. Arizona, 1 loss. UCLA, 1 loss. Florida State gets to go. Oh, they got a third-string quarterback playing. That's a great national championship game. Awful. 2000. Miami beat Florida State. Washington beat Miami. They all finished with 1 loss. Now, that was intelligent. We're going to take the team that didn't win against the other two teams. We could make a claim for Washington because they beat Miami, and we could make a claim for Miami because they beat Florida State, but we'll take Florida State. Awful system was the BCS. Awful. And people claim that, oh, well, we took the human element out of it. No, the human element was 2/3 of it. It continued to be a system that was manipulated by people. And the formulas didn't work because the teams don't play enough to have a formula. If you want to apply the BCS in the very best possible way to an athletic situation, cancel the Major League Baseball playoffs and implement the BCS system and say those two teams that finish 1 and 2 in the BCS, they should go to with the BCS formula, they should go to the World Series, and we don't need to play the Major League Baseball playoffs. You know why that would work? Better, at least better. It wouldn't work because you need to play playoffs and decide it on the field. But you know why that works best in baseball? Because they all play each other 162 times and have the most accurate metric of who's good and who's not good. Not when you've got teams that never play each other and you're trying to determine based on a computer system who's better. Dumb. BCS felt sorry for Bobby Bowden. Cade McNown in the national championship. That would have been something. BCS cheated everyone. Pretty much at some point it did. Certainly cheated us out of a lot of good games. Ah, coconut cane. Damn, Mark, calm the freak down. Go get a glass of water. Get 2 bottles of water here. We're stocked up, coconut. We're good to go. Got my 2 bottles of water. All right. Division 3 is a 32-team playoff. You know, it's funny when I hear people mention also that the playoff, an expanded playoff, would water down the regular season. That was pretty good. Water down the regular season. Okay. Does anyone complain about the NFL playoffs or the other sports playoffs where we have more than a third of the teams, 40% of the NFL teams make the playoffs? Okay. Expanding to 8 out of 130. So we still have like 6% of all college football teams make the playoffs. 6%. If we expand to 8, we're still talking about the very elite. That does not water it down. If you take any year and go to the number 8 team in the polls after the regular season, they will never have more than 2 losses. They will have 2 losses most of the time, maybe 1 loss. So we're not taking horrible teams. We're not taking 8-4 teams and putting them in a college football playoff. We're still taking the elite. And then I also hear the argument that the number 8 team in the country doesn't deserve to win a national championship. Okay. I don't know why number 4 deserves it. Number 8, there's sometimes not a whole lot of difference there. And the best point is that if you're the number 8 team in the country, first of all, we think you're number 8. You aren't necessarily number 8. You might be number 15. You might be number 3. But we think you're number 8. We've put you at number 8. That team to win the national championship, they're the lowest seed. They will have beaten the number 1, the number 2, and I believe the number 4. They will have to beat 3 of the top 7 teams in the country in consecutive weeks. 3 of the top 7 teams in the country. Imagine Michigan State's number 8 in the country. They make the college football playoff, and in 3 consecutive weeks, they beat Alabama, Ohio State, and Clemson. And we're still going to say, you know what? They went 11-2 in the regular season. They don't deserve that. All right. Top ranked teams are based on fake polls. Yeah, the polls are something else. And that's one of the reasons why I don't know how many of you guys were with me this last college football season, but it just started to drive me crazy looking at these polls that made no sense. And I took the 2 polls after they were released each Sunday and basically just ran through the inconsistencies of the polls. First of all, they start out by assuming so much. They assume who's good. There shouldn't be polls until there's actually games played that we can assess. Disney owns ESPN. ESPN owns the SEC network. Let's have 8 SEC teams in the playoffs. I think we're working toward that. 6-team playoff, 5 Power 5 conference winners. College football allows 1. See, the issue, Navy Thomas, I have with the 16 playoff is that I don't want to disadvantage or advantage any particular team. So 8 works perfectly, 4 works perfectly for a formatted bracket. You go to 6 teams, who gets the buys? Then the big controversy is who gets the buys, because that is an enormous advantage. So if we would have gone to 6 teams this year, we probably would have let in what? Ohio State and Central Florida, or maybe Ohio State and USC. I say Central Florida, Ohio State, but then we're still leaving out a conference champion with 6 teams. But anyway, let's say Ohio State and Central Florida. Who gets the buys? What 2 teams get the buys? I don't know. Who gets the buys? That would be controversial. That would be difficult to do. If that's the case, every conference needs to be in, including the MAC. So, Big Papi, you probably missed me off the top. So I've got 2 proposals, and I will not run through them top to bottom because other people have heard this. So you may want to watch it from the beginning. Proposal number 1, you let everybody in. You qualify every conference and don't give them false hope. Right now, the group of five has false hope of making a playoff. They're really out. We tease them to give them a chance or make them feel as though they have a chance. They don't have a chance. So you represent all 10 conferences, the Power Five and the Group of Five. That's 10 conferences. Then you fill out the 6 wild cards based on metrics and a college football playoff committee. I've got no issue with the committee as long as they're not selecting and excluding conference representation. For wild cards, hey, there's a way to do it. So we could do that one, or we could say, Group of Five, you're not good enough, go. We're only including the Power Five plus the independents, Notre Dame, etc. And we're playing an 8-team playoff and representing all 5 conference champions. I'm good with either one, but let's not give false hope to the Group of Five and let them think that they're actually involved and considered. Then stay at 4 in the Group of Five has its own natty. Navy Thomas, the problem I have with a 4 is you don't get all the conferences in. Why have conferences? We should dismiss these conference champions. If we're just going to select what we think are the 4 best teams, why don't we have base the semifinal games on the polls so that they can kind of play off the week before the actual playoffs start and we can eliminate whoever. So if we think the Pac-12 is awful, we'll say, well, do whatever you want. You're not included in the play-in games into the championship. You got to include all the conferences. That's why we have conferences. Why is right? Screw the conferences. Houston would have made it a couple of years ago if they didn't choke. They beat Oklahoma and Louisville. Yeah, that Houston team, unfortunately, that would have been interesting to see. And then they go up against a Florida State team in the Peach Bowl, albeit without their starting quarterback, and just laid the wood. Strength of schedule, Rick Rock. So the way things are right now, Rick, you have to include strength of schedule. That's what ushered Ohio State into the playoff in 2016. And forget what happened against Clemson. That's hindsight. But it was based on the Big Ten being really good and was based on them going on the road to Oklahoma and winning. And we saw this year with a number of teams. Strength of schedule based on, if we're going to stay with this system and not change it, definitely track record has much to do with it. And that's one of the reasons why I argued for Ohio State making the playoff over Alabama. And again, hold on. That doesn't mean I think Ohio State was better than Alabama. I wasn't making that determination. I picked Alabama to win the national championship. I picked them to beat Clemson and beat Georgia. I believe Ohio State had a better resume. They won a conference championship, arguably the best conference, and they had much better wins on their resume. So the track record was much better. And as long as we stay with this system, and we've got to leave out at least one conference champion, and now 2 years in a row, we leave out 2 conference champions. And if Notre Dame ever gets good to the extent that they're involved, as they almost were in 2015, then we're going to leave 3 conference champions out, possibly. Then we really need to look at the strength of the schedule. So I'm a firm believer, if we stay with this system, which we are for quite some time, in resume. And Ohio State last year had a resume that included Penn State, Wisconsin, Michigan State, etc. Anyway, they had 4 top 15 wins compared to Alabama's 2. Anyway. Getting hot at the right time is the answer. Sometimes 16 playoff. I'm trying to backtrack through this. Cupcake champions rest all season and have no injuries going into the playoffs against teams that fought to get there and now have injuries. Fill in. I know who you're probably targeting there, but I just don't buy that in the SEC. I believe it's the best conference. I think it's extremely close. I don't think it's a big margin. I think it's very close. So I think the Big Ten and the ACC are right there. Just because Alabama and Auburn and other teams play a cupcake before the final game doesn't mean that they have an easy run down the stretch. If you look at Alabama's November schedule, it's always difficult with LSU and Mississippi State and the like, and of course Auburn. The difference in talent is so drastic between some of the top 10 teams that I don't think a huge playoff would work. Okay. All right. So go Halos 27. Big difference in talent. Well, there are blowouts in every sport in playoffs. NBA playoffs, baseball, we see it in the NFL. We see blowouts in the playoffs. Not many, but we see some. We wouldn't see many in this with the top 8 teams playing, but would it happen? Sure. It's happened with 4 teams. We've seen blowouts. You're going to have bad games at times. It's inevitable, either because it's just not a good matchup or there is a talent disparity. When you get Michigan State on a field with Alabama, Michigan State has like top 30, 35 talent. Now, they are not the 35th best team in the country. They're more like the 10th best team in the country because they develop. But the talent disparity, if Michigan State doesn't play out of its mind, yeah, will show up at times. I think it's going to be rare, though, if you get the 8 best teams together. They should make the playoffs 6 teams, Jesse is telling us. 1 and 2 seed get buys. Jesse, I hear what you're saying, but I don't know why people need to be married to this 6 teams because you're giving a huge advantage to 2 teams. And who would those 2 teams be? Why the 2 teams? So this past season, it would have been Clemson. Who were the top 2 teams were Clemson and Georgia, right? Okay. Why were they the 2 best teams? Why not Oklahoma? In 2014, for some reason, Oregon and Alabama, they each lost a game, but people considered them to be the 2 best teams. I didn't know at the time why the argument was all about Ohio State, TCU, and Baylor. They all had 1 loss. Well, Oregon and Alabama had 1 loss too. Why are they given a pass into the playoff? And you could look at that every year. I don't know how you would determine in a reasonable way, in a sensible way, the top 2 teams to get buys, because that is a huge advantage, enormous advantage. All right, Jesse, I think I've covered everything. So that's pretty much what I've got. Green Man's got nobody can name any other college sport or level of football that has this few of teams that get into the playoffs. It's a joke. So Green Man, again, I don't know if you missed my comment, and that's what I was saying when people go crazy about the regular season won't mean anything if you include more teams. 12 teams make the NFL playoffs out of 32. 40%. The NFL playoffs are great. And I don't want college football to be like the NFL playoffs. I don't want 40% of the teams. But if you raise it to 8 out of 130, that's 6%. 6%. That's like the Super Bowl. That's like the 2 out of the 32. That's the same ratio. So you still have excellent teams competing, and I would argue the games would be more important down the stretch. The games would be more important because we have seen situations year after year in which you get to the last weekend of the season, and if all you care about is the playoff, or at the time the BCS, all you care about is the national championship, then you're like, there's only 2 games that matter this weekend. There's like 30 games, but only 2 matter. So forget the rest of the games. Nobody cares. Nobody wants to see Oklahoma and Oklahoma State play. It doesn't matter. The only games that matter are these 2 games. If we had 8 teams, more games would matter. We had a situation this last season because of the College Football Playoff Selection Committee's approach where the Iron Bowl, of all things, didn't matter. It actually aided the loser by keeping them home. And it hurt the winner because it forced them to go to Atlanta and have to play one of the best teams in the country again. So we actually had a counterproductive, counterintuitive situation in the SEC where winning a game actually hurt you and losing what's supposed to be arguably the biggest game on the college football landscape, the Iron Bowl, it hurt the winner and it protected the loser from risking a game in Atlanta and getting knocked out of the playoff. Instead, they got to stay home and make it to the college football playoff. Dumb. People are still going to get screwed and people are still going to complain. Most of the teams that got in only lost one game. Okay. Yes, there are always going to be teams on the fringe because you have to have a cutoff point, but at least the cutoff point represents all the conferences. At least you have conference representation. Last season, we didn't have the Big Ten or the Pac-12 represented. In 2016, we didn't have the Big 12 represented. We didn't have in other times the Pac-12 represented, 2015. So, yes, if you have 8 teams, the number 9 team is going to say we should have been in. But their conference was represented. So they should have won a conference championship. Now you can win a conference championship and get left out. And you've got a gripe in an 8-team playoff system where all 5 conferences are represented with the champions, then nobody's got a gripe. You might say they have a gripe and they may think they have a gripe, but they don't have a gripe because the answer is you should have won your conference. But we can't tell teams that now because Ohio State can win a conference and USC can win a conference and Penn State can win a conference and Oklahoma can win a conference. And we say, we don't have enough spots for you. Sorry. All right. People are still getting screwed. Yeah, Alabama played LSU. They were number 4 at the time. We're talking about 2011. Well, if Auburn beat Clemson, they would have gotten in. Yeah, or if they would have beat Georgia, even with 2 losses. Although that was the reason apparently Ohio State didn't make it in, is that they lost 2, but Auburn would have made it in if they would have beaten Georgia with 2 losses. So again, the College Football Playoff Selection Committee's metrics, they change by the week and they change by the year. And it's a difficult deal. 4 spots, 5 conferences. It's very difficult. The Pac-12 sucks. Nobody even was top 6. Yeah, but you still have to include them. Now, if you want to make a decision at some point that the Pac-12 sucks and it sucked for 10 years, get rid of it. Let's change the system or do something, or they need to expand. That's one thing, but you can't overreact to one specific year. The NFL doesn't say the AFC West really sucked this year. Let's leave them out of the playoff because the Ravens or the Steelers were in 3rd place and they're better than the Chargers who won the AFC West. They don't overreact to one season or 2 seasons. You win your conference, you get in. What's your preseason Heisman top 10 and top 10 teams? Alex, man, Heisman. We'll get to that. We'll get to the Heisman and we'll get to the top 10 teams. I am somebody who releases my predictions basically a day before the season starts. I like to grind it right down to the last day. So my official predictions will come out that last week of August, and we will do a lot of Heisman stuff. You guys have to remind me, the Heisman, I think it's the most prestigious award in American sports, but it's full of politics. It's not like the NFL MVP, where some guy we've never heard of could get the starting running back position. Let's say Leonard Fournette gets hurt in Jacksonville and they elevate some 3rd stringer and he runs for 1,800 yards and 25 touchdowns. He's going to win the MVP. People aren't going to say, well, he wasn't a preseason candidate. What's a preseason candidate for an award? Just let the people play, let the players play, and let's make a determination who the best player is. And it doesn't go to the best player anyway. It goes to the best skill position player, i.e. quarterback in the nation. If you're the best offensive lineman in America or the best of anything on defense, aside from Charles Woodson playing out of his mind and playing some offense, you can't win the Heisman. It goes to the best skill position player. And again, you have to be basically a preseason. You have to be in the talk. And that's just dumb. Don't worry, Oregon is on its way back to save the pack. Huskers, Adrian Martinez for the Heisman. Justin Herbert will win the Heisman and make a lot of money in the NFL, it appears. He's up on top of most of the draft boards. Martin, Penn State on 2016 didn't get in because they got blown up by Michigan. Ohio State. I lost your comment. Ohio State didn't get in last year because they got blown up by Iowa. Moral of story, don't get blown out. Okay. Don't get blown out. Again, we have to have a system where we rate wins and losses. It no longer matters who you beat or who you lost to. It's how much you lost to them by. Okay, I understand that, and we're forced to do that with this stupid system. Okay. Do we think that the Alabama team of 2016 was capable of losing to Pitt? Does anybody out there think Alabama would have lost to Pitt in 2016? Okay. Alabama was certainly capable of losing to a team that lost to Pitt. So when we talk about Ohio State losing to Iowa, that was a bad loss against a marginal, decent team, top, 35 team, 35, 40 team, especially in that stadium. That's a tough place to play. But there was no excuse for Ohio State going in there, getting blown out and losing to Iowa. Now, if they would have lost on a last second field goal, 20-17, I get your point. That game's looked at differently. And I understand why Ohio State got left out. And I didn't ever state that Ohio State was better than Alabama last year. I just thought that the conference championship and the 4 top 15 wins compared to the 2 arguably close top 15 wins, LSU and Mississippi State, that Alabama had, the wins, if you're going to chastise and batter Ohio State for that loss and look at the losses and emphasize the losses, then you need to do the same for the wins. And I never heard, if you want to rate a win on the same scale of being impressive as unimpressive as the loss was for Ohio State in losing at Iowa by 31, Ohio State beat Michigan State, who went 10-3 and finished in the top 15 in the country, by 45 points. They annihilated a good Michigan State team that beat Penn State, that beat Northwestern and Washington State in Michigan. They beat them 48-3. I never heard that game brought up. It wasn't brought up once. What is Alabama's equivalent? What did Alabama do equivalent to Ohio State beating Michigan State 48-3? So if you're going to hold that kind of weight in rating losses, you have to do the same thing with the wins. It doesn't negate what Ohio State failed to do at Iowa City, but we should give the same weight to impressive wins over quality opponents. Alabama didn't have that win. They didn't have the Michigan State win. They didn't have a Penn State win. They didn't have 2 top 10 wins like Ohio State did in defeating Wisconsin and Penn State. They didn't have that. They beat Mississippi State and LSU. That was their season. And depending on the argument, they beat Florida State, who was supposed to be the 3rd best team in the country. And we will not get into that right now. All right, everybody. Love the comments. Love the debate. We could talk probably playoff every day. We could just have a playoff segment every day talking about who should have been in. We could talk about what happened in 1997. And yeah, we could go on and on with all of that. And I would love it. So I appreciate all the comments. If I missed your comment, you had something really good to say, I apologize. I couldn't get to everything there. But again, whether you agree or disagree with me, that's not what I care about. I just like the good debate, the discussion. And as long as you bring some actual facts and reason to the table, that's all I care about. And respect those people that are also chatting, and respect me to a certain extent. I appreciate you guys again. Please subscribe to Mark Rogers TV. We're trying to build something here and make it something special in terms of analysis of the game we love, college football, all the time. And we bring on the best bloggers, broadcasters, and writers in the industry. And I'm always going to shoot off my mouth and give my analysis and break down schedules and rankings and ratings and college football playoff system proposals, and do that all the time. And hopefully you enjoy it. Give me content suggestions, and also guests that you would like to see at Mark Rogers TV. And regardless of who that is, I've had on Peter Burns many times from the SEC Network and ESPN, Jerry DiNardo of the Big Ten Network. So we can't go too high. So shoot for the moon. I don't know if Paul Feinbaum's going to get back to me, even though that would be a great get. We would have a great discussion. But I've tweeted out to him, no response. So I will try to get the best contributors on here. And as we grow, then we gain a little bit more respect. We had Phil Steele on a couple of years back. Unfortunately, his contract with ESPN prohibits him from getting back on Mark Rogers TV. But we will continue to try for the best possible knowledgeable guests to get on here. So we appreciate it. We will see you next time. We've got 3 great guests coming up on Tuesday night, and we hope you'll be right here for more college football talk right here on Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football.